December 12, 1944. 21:40 hours, Versailles Palace, second floor. The palace is quiet in the way only command centers become after midnight. No footsteps in the corridors, no voices behind closed doors. Just the low electrical hum of fluorescent lights and the distant ticking of a clock tower somewhere beyond the gardens. General Dwight David Eisenhower sits alone in his office. Supreme commander of more than 4 million Allied soldiers, responsible for a front stretching from the North Sea to the Swiss border. An ashtray overflows beside him. A cigarette burns unattended as he reads the latest G2 intelligence summary compiled from German prisoner interrogations and intercepted field reports. His eyes move steadily, methodically, trained by years of staff work to catch anomalies rather than confirmations. Then they stop. All available German panzer reserves positioned opposite 3rd Army sector. Primary concern, Patton exploitation threat. One below it, a single line that contradicts months of Allied planning. Northern front assessed as secondary risk. Eisenhower reads it again. Then a third time. He leans back, removes his reading glasses and looks up at the ceiling without really seeing it. The weight pressing on him tonight is not German strength, it is German intent. The Wehrmacht is not reacting to where the Allies are strongest. It is reacting to where it is most afraid. In this moment, the Supreme Commander realizes he has been fighting the wrong war. Maps cover every wall of the office. Blue and red arrows overlap across northern France, Belgium, and western Germany. Carefully drawn plans compete with hard intelligence that refuses to conform. Outside the tall windows, December fog settles into the palace gardens, swallowing statues and paths in pale grey silence. Inside, Eisenhower commands millions. But his real struggle is quieter and more corrosive. It is not against the Wehrmacht. It is against the structure of Allied command itself. Two generals dominate his war, Bernard Montgomery in the north, George Patton in the south. Their rivalry consumes fuel, staff time, political capital, and Eisenhower's own patience. And tonight, for the first time, the enemy has already chosen which one matters more. The realization does not arrive dramatically. It accumulates. And once seen, it cannot be unseen. The margin Eisenhower senses is no longer measured in divisions, it is measured in fear. 2 days earlier, the pattern began to emerge. December 10th, 1944, afternoon, an Allied interrogation facility several miles behind the front lines. The room is unremarkable. Bare walls, a single table, 2 American intelligence officers. Across from them sits a captured Oberst from the German 5th Panzer Army. He is exhausted, uninjured, and finished pretending. Major Harlan Wickersham leans forward. 43 years old, West Point class of 23. A man who has spent 3 years learning to read the spaces between words. His questions are routine. Order of battle, supply state, defensive intentions. Beside him sits Captain Emil Strauss, 31, German-American, fluent in the language of the enemy in ways that go beyond vocabulary. He takes notes in neat shorthand, capturing not just answers, but tone, hesitation, the small surrenders of truth. The Oberst answers mechanically at first. Unit designations, positions, the usual deflections. Then Wickersham asks where German reserves are positioned. The answer is immediate. We know Montgomery will come. We can calculate his build-up and prepare defenses. The Oberst pauses, not for effect, for something heavier. Resignation, perhaps, or acknowledgement of a truth his superiors refuse to speak aloud. Patton, we never know, so we must hold everything back for him. The sentence lands heavily, not dramatic, not emotional, simply factual. The kind of statement given by a man who has watched plans collapse too often to lie about it. Wickersham does not react. Years of interrogation have taught him that revelation requires silence. He glances at Strauss. A flicker of recognition passes between them. This is the 17th time they have heard this. 17 separate interrogations since October. 17 captured officers from different units, different sectors, different ranks, all saying the same thing in different words. The Germans respect Montgomery. They fear Patton. Later that evening, Wickersham types the transcript himself. 2 copies, one for the files, one for immediate forwarding. Strauss adds a handwritten note at the bottom. Pattern consistent across all interrogations since October. 17 in total, enemy fixation on 3rd Army sector, regardless of actual threat assessment. The report is stamped confidential and sent up the chain. By nightfall on December 11th, it reaches the desk of General Walter Bedell-Smith at Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. Bedell-Smith is not a man given to speculation. He is Eisenhower's chief of staff, his enforcer. the filter through which chaos becomes clarity. At 49, he has learned to recognize the difference between noise and signal. He reads Wickersham's report twice. Then he pulls 17 other files from the intelligence archive, lays them side by side on his desk. Different interrogators, different dates, different German units. The pattern is undeniable. He clips the reports together, adds his own note in precise handwriting. This matches 17 similar interrogations. Enemy behavior suggests psychological rather than tactical assessment of Allied commanders. Recommend immediate strategic review. The file goes to Eisenhower. December 11th, evening. The war room at Versailles. Eisenhower does not convene a conference. He does not issue a directive marked urgent. The order is delivered quietly, almost casually, to his operations staff. Compile a comprehensive map. All confirm German panzer and mechanized formations along the Western Front. Current positions, readiness states, estimated response times, no interpretation, just placement. By nightfall, the war room table is cleared. Fresh maps are rolled out beneath harsh overhead lights. Colored pins and grease pencil marks replace assumptions with geometry. The effect is immediate. Against Montgomery's 21st Army Group in the north stand 33 Allied divisions. Clear priority, secure ports, ample fuel, the main thrust toward the Ruhr, Germany's industrial heart. The Wehrmacht counters them with layered defenses and 6 panzer divisions positioned for static defense. South of that, against Patton's Third Army, the picture warps. Fewer Allied divisions, chronic fuel shortages, a supporting role on paper. Yet opposite Patton sit 11 panzer divisions, plus additional mobile reserves positioned within 48 hours, striking distance. The German armoured mass is not spread evenly. It is stacked. The room goes silent as the numbers settle, not because they are surprising, because they are undeniable. Eisenhower traces the red enemy symbols with his finger. Each marker represents thousands of men, hundreds of tanks, entire formations immobilized by anticipation rather than contact. Patton faces nearly double the armoured opposition with a fraction of the logistical support, and still his army advances faster, penetrates deeper, forces constant German adjustment. The overhead lights cast sharp shadows across Europe. The illusion of balance collapses under simple arithmetic. Eisenhower understands the implication instantly. He has been allocating resources according to Allied politics and command mythology. The enemy has been allocating resources according to fear, and fear has been winning. The structure Eisenhower commands is not built on fear, it is built on reputation. Since El Alamein in October 1942, Bernard Law Montgomery has carried an aura few Allied commanders possess. Victory without collapse, planning without improvisation, a general who does not lose. British war correspondents treat him as doctrine made flesh. Careful preparation, overwhelming force, absolute control of tempo. By the summer of 1944, that reputation has hardened into institutional fact. After Normandy, Eisenhower assigns Montgomery the main northern thrust. The Ruhr lies beyond his front. Germany's industrial heart. To reach it requires ports, roads, railheads, and time. Montgomery receives all three. Fuel allocations flow north. Supply priorities follow. At briefings, British liaison officers present his plans with polished certainty. Large maps, clean arrows, timetables measured in weeks, not hours. The message is always the same. When conditions are correct, victory is inevitable. Eisenhower approves it again and again. He needs London's confidence. He needs Churchill's support. And Montgomery's methodical style offers something Eisenhower values deeply. Predictability. Predictability reassures politicians. Predictability stabilizes coalitions. But predictability also radiates outward. German intelligence tracks every build-up, every supply convoy entering Antwerp, every pause before a deliberate assault. Wehrmacht planners do not need imagination to counter Montgomery. They need patience. Market Garden, launched in September, was meant to break the pattern. Instead, it reinforced it. A bold concept executed with rigid assumptions. When the timetable failed, the operation collapsed into Dutch mud. Antwerp took weeks longer to clear than promised. The northern advance slowed. Still, the mythology held. Eisenhower does not challenge it publicly. To do so would fracture Allied unity. Questioning Montgomery means questioning Britain's contribution. At the moment, Britain demands recognition. So Eisenhower absorbs the tension silently, approving plans, signing fuel orders, defending choices he privately begins to doubt. The war on paper remains orderly, but the intelligence does not, because while Allied command allocates resources based on reputation, the enemy allocates resources based on anxiety. And anxiety, unlike doctrine, leaves tracks. By late November, those tracks are becoming impossible to ignore. The numbers tell a story Allied command does not want to hear. Montgomery's 21st Army Group receives 1,400 tons of fuel per day. 80,000 men in constant resupply, 5,000 artillery pieces supported by dedicated transport columns. Patton's Third Army receives 700 tons per day, single division mobility, minimal artillery support, yet Patton advances faster, penetrates deeper, forces German commanders to react rather than prepare. The disparity is not lost on the German High Command. Captured maps recovered from Wehrmacht headquarters tell the same story. Patton's sector is marked in red, danger zones, probable breakthrough axes, mobile reserve response arrows radiate outward in every direction. Montgomery's front receives something else entirely: fixed defensive belts, calculated depth, static infantry divisions. Colonel Benjamin Monk Dixon, Third Army's intelligence chief, forwards summaries to SHAEF, noting the disparity. German prisoners speak freely about where they expect crisis to emerge, not north, south. Eisenhower reads these reports alone, long after staff briefings end. Coffee sits untouched. The palace grows colder as night deepens. He circles phrases in red pencil, underlines Patton's name more than once. Panzer reserves remain uncommitted elsewhere, mobile formations held back, waiting. The analysts call it curiosity. Eisenhower recognizes it as fear. Fear does not announce itself in proclamations. It reveals itself in restraint, in what an enemy refuses to risk, in where he locks his strength instead of using it. Since September, the Wehrmacht has refused to shift its armored fist away from Third Army, not because Patton is strongest, because he is least predictable. And so we return to December 12th, 2140 hours, room 24, second floor, away from the operations center. Eisenhower asks for Walter Bedell Smith by name. Not through aides, not through staff channels, direct, immediate. Smith arrives to find the office dimly lit, a single desk lamp throwing long shadows across the maps. Eisenhower stands at the window, hands in his pockets, looking out into the darkness of the palace gardens. For several seconds, neither man speaks. Bedell Smith is not just chief of staff, he is Eisenhower's filter, his enforcer, the one man who hears what cannot circulate. What is said here will not reach Churchill, or Marshall, or the press. Without turning, Eisenhower breaks the silence. Bedell, when you read those German intercepts, what do you actually see? Smith hesitates, not because the answer is unclear, because it is dangerous. Then he answers. They're positioning for Patton, sir. They've been positioning for him since September. Eisenhower turns slowly. His face looks older tonight, drawn, exhausted. Ash from a cigarette spills onto the carpet. They're not afraid of Monty. The words land flat. No bitterness, no accusation. They respect him, they plan for him, but they're not afraid of him. Smith nods once. That's what the data says. Eisenhower walks to his desk and lifts the intelligence file with both hands as if its weight has increased. His voice drops. Then Patton's worth more to us. Frightening them is beating them. He pauses. And I've been running this war backwards. The room absorbs the admission. Not dramatic, not emotional, just precise. 6 months of resource allocation, fuel, trucks, air priority, all shaped to satisfy Allied politics, while the enemy responds to something else entirely: fear. Outside the palace, clock tower strikes 10. The sound carries faintly through stone corridors and closed doors. Inside room 24, Allied command philosophy shifts, from reputation to perception, from mythology to psychology, and nothing written on the maps will ever look the same again. The room remains still after Eisenhower speaks. No one reaches for a chair. No one looks at the maps. This is not a briefing. It is a confession. Eisenhower lowers himself into his chair and opens the intelligence folder again, as if rereading it might change the conclusion. It does not. The words remain exactly where they were. Panzer reserves held against Third Army, mobile formations uncommitted elsewhere. He looks up at Smith. I've been trying to win this war by balancing allies. The sentence is measured, not bitter, not defensive, a statement of fact. But the Germans aren't balancing anything, they're reacting, and they're reacting to Patton. Smith does not interrupt. Eisenhower removes his glasses and sets them carefully on the desk. The gesture is deliberate, almost ritual. When he speaks again, the tone is quieter. We have treated fear like a byproduct, something that follows success. He shakes his head once. It's the other way around. The enemy isn't allocating forces based on our strength. They're allocating them based on who they believe will break their front if they blink. He pauses, choosing words that will never leave this room. Montgomery forces them to build defenses. Patton forces them to hold back their best troops. Smith exhales slowly. The implication is unavoidable. That means Patton is fixing German armor for us without orders, without permission, without even attacking. Eisenhower nods. And we've been starving him while rewarding predictability. For a moment, neither man speaks. The office seems smaller now, crowded by what has just been acknowledged. Eisenhower finally closes the folder. We don't publicize this, we don't explain it, we don't correct the mythology. He looks directly at Smith. But from this moment on, we plan around enemy fear, not Allied pride. That is all he says. That is all that needs to be said. In room 24 at 2140 hours, on December 12, 1944, the Supreme Commander of Allied Forces admits a truth that cannot be shared. The most valuable weapon he possesses is not an army group, it is the enemy's imagination, and he intends to use it. The change does not announce itself. There is no order marked urgent, no message sent down the chain declaring a new doctrine. But within 48 hours, the effects begin to register. Fuel allocations adjust slightly, not enough to trigger protests, but enough that Third Army staff officers notice the difference. Trains arrive on time, convoys move with fewer delays, requests that once stalled in committees now clear quietly. Patton's headquarters does not ask why, it never does. At Versailles, Eisenhower's tone shifts during briefings. He listens longer, interrupts less. When Montgomery's staff presents timelines, Eisenhower no longer nods automatically. He asks one question again and again. Where are the German reserves actually positioned? The room grows careful after that. Requests for northern priority are met with requests of Eisenhower's own, revised estimates, confirmation of enemy movement, evidence the German armor is committing, not merely waiting. None of it is confrontational, but none of it is deferential either. Bedell-Smith begins reframing operational discussions. Enemy disposition replaces Allied intention as the organizing principle. Maps are redrawn, not to show what the Allies plan to do, but what the Germans refuse to risk. It is a subtle inversion, and it changes everything. Montgomery does not receive a rebuke. He receives questions, the kind that force delay, the kind that drain momentum without ever challenging authority. Patton receives no praise. He receives silence and more fuel. Inside the operations center, staff officers sense the shift without being told. Conversations lower in volume. Assumptions are checked twice. The mythology that once guided decisions begins to crack under repeated contact with data. Eisenhower does not explain himself. Explanation creates politics. Instead, he watches, he waits, he lets the enemy confirm his judgment, and the enemy obliges. Within days, new intercepts arrive showing German mobile formations still anchored opposite Third Army. Even as pressure builds elsewhere, armor remains uncommitted, reserves remain frozen, fear holds them in place. In room 24, Eisenhower marks nothing on the map. He does not need to. The war has already started to bend. At Third Army headquarters 80 miles to the east, George Smith Patton Jr. does not know any of this. 59 years old. 2 pearl-handled revolvers on his hips, a voice that can strip paint from walls, and a mind that processes terrain like sheet music. He paces the operations tent, cigar clamped between his teeth, studying maps with the intensity of a man looking for exits in a burning building. His staff watches carefully. They have learned to read the signs, the narrowed eyes, the sudden silence before eruption. Patton is planning something. He is always planning something, but tonight something is different. Fuel trucks arrived this morning without requisition delays. Ammunition convoys cleared checkpoints ahead of schedule. For 3 months, Third Army has operated on starvation rations, while Montgomery's forces in the north consumed priority shipments. Now, without explanation, the flow has changed. Patton does not question it. In his experience, bureaucracy occasionally corrects itself through sheer accident, or someone at SHAEF finally developed a spine. He stabs a finger at the map. The Saar. We hit them here, then pivot north before they can reinforce. His operations officer, Colonel Maddox, studies the plan with practiced skepticism. Sir, we don't have authorization for a major offensive. SHAEF priority remains. Fuck SHAEF priority. Patton's voice is conversational, almost cheerful, which makes it more dangerous. I don't need authorization to probe enemy positions. I don't need permission to maintain aggressive reconnaissance. And if my reconnaissance happens to find a gap and exploit it before some staff puke in Versailles tells me to stop, well, he grins, not pleasantly. That's just good soldiering. The staff officers exchange glances. This is how Patton operates, pushing boundaries until boundaries become irrelevant, acting first, apologizing never. What Patton does not know is that his aggression is no longer an inconvenience to Allied command. It is the strategy. 80 miles away, Eisenhower is counting on exactly this: the unpredictability, the refusal to wait for perfect conditions, the instinct to attack when others would consolidate. Patton believes he is fighting despite Eisenhower. The truth is more complex and lonelier. At 21st Army Group headquarters in Belgium, Bernard Law Montgomery sits in a different kind of silence. 57 years old, 2 small stars on each shoulder, the narrow face and sharp eyes of a man who has spent a career proving doubters wrong. His operations room is immaculate, maps aligned with geometric precision, colored pencils arranged by shade. Every detail controlled, because control is what separates victory from catastrophe. He is planning the Rhine crossing, the great thrust into Germany's industrial heart. Months of preparation, thousands of calculations, nothing left to chance. His Chief of Staff, Brigadier Williams, presents the latest logistics report. Fuel allocation for January is confirmed at 1,400 tons per day. Artillery support remains at 5,000 pieces. Air cover? What about Patton? Montgomery's voice is clipped. Welsh accent softened by years of command, but never quite eliminated. Williams hesitates. Third Army allocation has increased slightly, sir. 700 tons per day, up from 650. Montgomery's jaw tightens, not dramatically, just enough to signal displeasure. I see. And has Schaeff explained this reallocation? No, sir, just routine adjustment according to the order. Montgomery returns his attention to the map. Rhine crossings marked in blue. Objectives circled, timelines calculated down to the hour. Patton's methods are reckless, undisciplined. He wins through luck and American enthusiasm, not through proper planning. Williams says nothing. He has heard this before. When I cross the Rhine, it will be done correctly. Overwhelming force, minimal casualties, the way Montgomery does things. What Montgomery does not see is that his correctness has become his limitation. The Wehrmacht does not fear proper planning. It respects it, prepares for it, waits for it. Fear requires something else, something Montgomery's methodical nature cannot provide. Unpredictability. December 15th, evening. Ultra intercepts arrive at Versailles in the usual manner. Encrypted German communications decoded by British intelligence at Bletchley Park forwarded to Allied command with clinical precision. Most are routine. Troop movements, supply requests, the administrative debris of a Wehrmacht stretched across a dying empire. But one message stops the duty officer cold. Offensive preparations complete. Attack Ardennes, dawn December the 16th. Primary concern. Rapid response from Patton's Third Army if southern flank exposed during breakthrough operation. The message is flagged urgent and hand-carried to Eisenhower's office. He reads it once, then again more slowly. The Ardennes, the quiet sector between Montgomery's forces in the north and Patton's in the south, thinly held by American divisions resting and refitting after months of combat. A gamble, a massive, desperate gamble. But what strikes Eisenhower is not the attack itself. It is the parenthetical concern, the admission of fear embedded in operational orders. The Germans are not attacking because they see opportunity. They are attacking because they fear Patton will attack first. This is preemptive fear. Eisenhower sets the message on his desk and lights another cigarette. He does not call for staff, does not convene an emergency meeting. He thinks. The Wehrmacht is about to throw its remaining strength into a winter offensive through difficult terrain. They will achieve surprise, they will penetrate deep, they will create crisis. But they are already worried about Patton's response. Before the first shot is fired, the enemy is fighting a ghost. Eisenhower looks at the map on his wall, the Ardennes sector. Patton's Third Army to the south, currently engaged in limited operations near the Saar. To pivot an entire army 90 degrees in winter conditions across congested roads into a battle still unfolding would require days. A week according to doctrine, but doctrine does not account for Patton, and the Germans know it. Outside, December fog presses against the windows. Inside, Eisenhower sees the shape of the coming battle with sudden clarity. The enemy has already made their move, not with tanks or infantry, with psychology. They fear what Patton might do more than they trust what they are doing. That fear is a weapon. And Eisenhower intends to sharpen it. He picks up the phone. "Get me General Patton." The call comes through at 2200 hours. Patton is still in the operations tent working through reconnaissance reports when his aide interrupts. "Sir Supreme Commander on the line." Patton takes the receiver. His voice is guarded. Calls from Eisenhower rarely bring good news. "Patton!" "George." Eisenhower's voice is calm, almost casual. "How fast can you disengage current operations and pivot north?" Patton does not hesitate. 48 hours, 3 divisions, maybe 4 if the roads cooperate. There is a pause on the line. Then Eisenhower's voice quieter now. "Doctrine says a week minimum for that kind of maneuver." Patton's laugh is short, humorless. "Fuck doctrine, Ike. When do you need me?" Another pause, longer this time. When Eisenhower speaks again, there is something in his tone Patton has never heard before. Not quite satisfaction, not quite relief. Something sharper. "I need you to scare them, George, before you even arrive." Patton frowns. What the hell does that mean? It means the Germans are about to attack through the Ardennes at dawn, and they're already worried about you. They should be. Yes, they should, so I want you to make noise. Visible preparations, let them see you moving, let them think you're coming. I am coming. I know, but I want them afraid before you get there. Can you do that? Patton's grin is audible over the phone. Hell yes, I can do that. Good, start now. I'll send written orders in the morning. The line goes dead. Patton stands holding the receiver for a moment. Then he turns to his staff with the expression of a man who has just been given permission to do what he was going to do anyway. "Gentlemen, we're going to war. Again. And apparently we're supposed to be scary about it." His operations officer ventures a question. "Sir, what exactly did the Supreme Commander tell?" He said scare them. So we're going to scare them. Get 3rd Armored moving. Visible columns on every major road heading north. I want the Germans to see us coming from 50 miles away. "But sir, we won't arrive for 2 days at least." Exactly. 2 days of them shitting themselves wondering where we'll hit. 2 days of them pulling reserves they can't spare. 2 days of fear. Patton turns back to the map. Sometimes, gentlemen, the threat of a punch is worth more than the punch itself. He does not know how right he is, or that Eisenhower is counting on exactly this instinct. December 16th, 1944, 0430 hours. The Ardennes forest erupts. 2,000 German guns open fire simultaneously along an 80-mile front. Shells tear through morning darkness. Trees explode into splinters. American positions, thinly held and unprepared, dissolve under the barrage. Within hours, panzer columns are pushing west through snow and fog. Entire American units are surrounded, scattered, trying to reassemble in chaos. The Battle of the Bulge has begun. At Schaeff, phones ring without pause. Reports arrive incomplete, contradictory, alarming. German columns advancing west, American divisions cut off, fuel dumps captured intact. For many commanders, the question is immediate and overwhelming. Where is the main German objective? Eisenhower does not ask it. He studies the map in silence, cigarette smoke hanging above the table. To him, the offensive is not a mystery. It is a gamble. And like all gambles, it reveals what the gambler fears most. Within hours, ultra-intercepts confirm it. German operational traffic fixates on one concern above all others. Where is Patton? Not Montgomery's massed forces in the north, not Antwerp, not the ports. Patton. German planners assume Third Army will counterattack. They do not know where or when, only that it will come. Their orders betray it. Reserves are held back. Mobile divisions hesitate, waiting for a blow they are certain is coming. Eisenhower does not debate options. He does not convene extended discussion. The order has already been given. Third Army will disengage and pivot north. Now he watches and waits and listens to the enemy confirm what he already knows. They are not fighting the battle they planned. They are fighting the battle they fear, and that fear will destroy them. December 16th, 1944, noon. The operations center at Versailles has transformed into controlled chaos. Staff officers crowd around map tables. Phones ring in overlapping cascades. Situation reports arrive faster than they can be processed. German penetration 15 miles in some sectors. American units retreating or surrounded. Communications disrupted. Chain of command fracturing under pressure. Senior commanders demand immediate response. Counterattack? Reinforce? Establish defensive lines. The voices rise in pitch and urgency. Eisenhower stands at the center of it all, silent as stone. He has ordered his chief of staff to compile every ultra-intercept from the past 6 hours. Not the tactical movements, the command-level communications, the messages that reveal intention rather than position. Bedell Smith returns with a folder, sets it on the table without ceremony. Eisenhower opens it, reads in silence while the room buzzes around him. Message after message. Different units, different commanders, all circling the same question. Third Army status, Patton current location, southern flank security assessment. One message from Field Marshal von Rundstedt's headquarters to 5th Panzer Army stands out. Breakthrough proceeding as planned, however maintain mobile reserves in southern sector readiness. Patton exploitation remains primary threat to operational success. Eisenhower closes the folder. They are winning, achieving surprise, penetrating deep, and they are already afraid. He looks up at the assembled staff. His voice cuts through the noise without rising. Gentlemen, the enemy has just told us how to beat them. The room goes quiet. They fear Patton's response more than they trust their own success. So, we give them what they fear. Not the reality, the possibility. He turns to Bedell Smith. How visible is Third Army's movement north? Extremely visible, sir. General Patton has every available vehicle on major roads. No attempt at concealment. Good, I want it more visible. Air reconnaissance flights over his columns, radio traffic increase. Make sure German intelligence cannot miss it. A British liaison officer ventures a question. Sir, won't that alert them to our response? Eisenhower's smile is cold. Major, they're already alert. They've been alert since before they attacked. The question is not whether they know Patton is coming. The question is where he'll arrive and what he'll do when he gets there. He pauses. And that uncertainty is worth more to us than surprise. December 17th, Third Army sectors. The pivot has begun. An entire field army rotating 90 degrees. Infantry divisions disengaging from active combat. Artillery battalions limbering guns. Tank battalions forming road columns. Supply trains reversing direction. According to every manual, every doctrine, every lesson learned from 3 years of war, this should take a week minimum. Patton has ordered it done in 48 hours. His staff works through the night. Orders cut and distributed. Movement tables calculated and recalculated. Road networks mapped to prevent bottlenecks. But the real work is being done by men who have learned to trust Patton's instinct over regulation. Sergeants who wake their platoons at 0300 and have them rolling by 0430. Company commanders who navigate by compass and road signs rather than waiting for guides. Battalion commanders who push forward without confirmation that the road ahead is clear. It is chaotic, exhausting. By any measure of proper military procedure, it borders on reckless. It also works. By dawn on the 17th, lead elements of 4th Armoured Division are already 60 miles north of their starting positions. By noon, reconnaissance units are probing roads toward Bastogne, and the Germans are watching. Every major road carries American columns. Every crossroad shows evidence of heavy traffic. German observation posts report the movement. Forward units relay the information up the chain. At Wehrmacht headquarters, the reports pile up with mechanical predictability. American armor moving north from Saar sector. Third Army units identified on multiple axes. Patton repositioning for counteroffensive. Each report triggers the same response. Reassess southern flank security. Reposition mobile reserves. Maintain readiness for exploitation threat. Divisions that should be pushing west toward the Meuse River instead slow their advance. Commanders who should be committing reserves instead hold them back. The offensive continues, but its momentum begins to fragment. Not because of what the Americans are doing, because of what the Germans fear they will do. Eisenhower receives hourly updates, not about American movements, about German reactions. Ultra-intercepts show the pattern with crystalline clarity. Wehrmacht commanders arguing about reserve placement. Mobile units receiving contradictory orders. Entire panzer divisions held in positions where they can react to Patton rather than support the offensive. In the operations center, staff officers begin to understand what Eisenhower saw 3 days ago. The enemy is fighting 2 battles, the one they planned and the one they fear. And the second battle is already being lost. Bedell Smith finds Eisenhower in his office late on the 17th. The Supreme Commander is studying not a map of the Ardennes, but a map of German unit dispositions. Red markers showing panzer divisions, blue arrows showing their movement since the offensive began. The pattern is unmistakable. Formations that should be moving west are instead shifting south. Reserves that should be committed are instead held back. They're paralyzed, Smith says quietly. Eisenhower nods. Not paralyzed, divided. They're trying to win the battle they started while defending against the battle they think is coming. He taps the map. A commander who fights 2 battles loses both. Smith looks at the timestamps on the intercepts. Patton won't arrive in strength for another 36 hours at minimum. I know, but they're already reacting as if he's there. Eisenhower's expression does not change. That's the point, Bedell. By the time George actually arrives, they'll have bled away half their operational flexibility worrying about it. They're not fighting Third Army, they're fighting the idea of Third Army. He closes the folder. And you can't kill an idea with panzers. December 18th, Bastogne. The town sits at a critical road junction in the Ardennes. 7 major roads converge. Control Bastogne, and you control movement through the entire sector. The German offensive has surrounded it. Elements of the 5th Panzer Army and 7th Army have the town encircled. Inside, the American 101st Airborne Division and attached units dig in for siege. 10,000 men, limited ammunition, no certainty of relief. The German commander sends an ultimatum: surrender or be destroyed. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, acting commander of the 101st, responds with a single word: nuts. The message becomes famous, a symbol of American defiance. What it does not show is the calculation beneath the defiance. McAuliffe knows Patton is coming. Third Army radio traffic makes that clear. The question is timing. Can the 101st hold long enough? But there is another calculation happening simultaneously. At German 5th Panzer Army headquarters, commanders face the same question from a different angle. Can they take Bastogne before Patton arrives? And more critically, should they commit the reserves necessary to take it? The town is important, but it is not essential. The offensive can bypass it, flow around it, leave it isolated and continue west. But doing so means accepting risk. Risk that Patton will use Bastogne as a base. Risk that American forces will counterattack from a fortified position. Risk that the town becomes a thorn they cannot afford to ignore. So they hesitate, not from weakness, from uncertainty. Commit reserves to reduce Bastogne and potentially expose the southern flank to Patton's armor. Or bypass Bastogne and potentially allow it to become a rallying point for American counteroffensive. There is no good answer, so they do both, and neither. Units probe Bastogne without full commitment. Reserves positioned to support the siege but remain mobile enough to respond elsewhere. Artillery bombards the town, but infantry assaults lack the weight to overwhelm defenders. It is the tactical embodiment of fear, present everywhere, decisive nowhere. Inside Bastogne, the 101st holds, not because the German assault fails, because the assault never comes with full force. The Wehrmacht is saving strength for Patton, who is still a day away. December 19th, 3rd Army Forward Headquarters. Patton stands in a farmhouse converted to command post. Maps cover every surface. His operations staff works in controlled frenzy. Movement orders, artillery positioning, coordination with air support. The pivot is nearly complete. 4th Armored Division is in position. 80th Infantry Division close behind. 26th Infantry Division securing flanks. In 60 hours, Patton has moved 3 full divisions 90 degrees through winter conditions. Losses from the movement itself have been minimal. Organization has held. It should not have been possible. But Patton's career has been built on impossible maneuvers executed through will and profanity. He studies the map of Bastogne, German positions marked in red, American defenders in blue, the siege tightening but not yet complete. His operations officer provides the assessment. So 4th Armored can reach Bastogne in 36 hours, but German positions are strengthening, will face heavy resistance. Patton's finger traces the roads. How heavy? Initial estimates suggest 2 panzer divisions covering approaches, with more in reserve. In reserve where? The operations officer consults his notes. That's unclear, sir. Intelligence shows contradictory German movements. Some units moving to block our approach, others holding positions that don't make tactical sense unless they're covering against a wider breakthrough. Patton looks up. They don't know what we're going to do. Sir, they're spreading out because they don't know where we'll hit hardest. They're defending against possibilities instead of realities. He grins. The expression would be pleasant on another face. On Patton, it looks predatory. So we give them more possibilities. I want reconnaissance in force on every approach road. Make them think we're coming from 6 directions at once.
Sir, that will disperse our strength. It will disperse their attention. They've got panzers sitting in fields wondering which road we'll use. Every hour they spend guessing is an hour the 101st gets to fortify Bastogne. He turns back to the map. We're not just relieving a town colonel, we're fighting a battle the Germans started losing before we fired a shot. What Patton does not know is how right he is, or that 80 miles away Eisenhower is reading intercepts that prove it.
December 20th, Versailles. The ultra-summaries paint a picture of Wehrmacht command in progressive dissolution. Not collapse, not panic, something more insidious. the slow fragmentation of operational coherence. 5th Panzer Army requests additional reserves for Bastogne reduction. 7th Army requests the same reserves to secure breakthrough routes. 6th Panzer Army further north demands priority for exploitation toward Antwerp. Von Rundstedt's headquarters tries to adjudicate, but every decision is shadowed by the same calculation. Where is Patton? When will he strike? With what force mobile reserves that should be committed to exploitation are instead held ready to respond to 3rd Army? Panzer divisions that should be pushing west are instead positioned to defend south. One intercept from a Panzer Corps commander to his division leaders is particularly revealing. Maintain current positions until Patton's main axis of advance is determined. Do not commit to engagement that prevents rapid redeployment south. Eisenhower reads it twice. The Germans are winning the battle they planned, penetrating deep, causing crisis, but they are preparing for the battle they fear, and preparation for a threat is commitment away from opportunity. He calls Bedell Smith to his office, shows him the intercept without comment. Smith reads it, looks up. They're immobilizing themselves. Yes. Patton hasn't even engaged yet. No. Smith sets the paper down carefully. This is what you saw. On December 12th, they're not afraid of our strength, they're afraid of our unpredictability. Eisenhower lights a cigarette. Montgomery represents everything the Wehrmacht knows how to counter. Preparation, overwhelming force, methodical advance. They can calculate him, build defenses, match him with doctrine. He exhales smoke. Patton represents everything they don't know how to counter. He attacks when they expect consolidation. He commits when they expect caution. He improvises when they expect planning. So they freeze. Not freeze, hedge. They try to win the current battle while defending against the possible battle, and hedging means they do neither completely. Smith is quiet for a moment. Does George know that he's not just relieving Bastogne, that he's paralyzing an entire offensive just by moving? Eisenhower's expression is unreadable. No, and we don't tell him. If Patton knew he was a psychological weapon, he might start thinking like one. Right now, his value is that he thinks like Patton, aggressive, instinctive, unpredictable. That's a hell of a thing, using a man without him knowing it. Yes. The word hangs in the air. Eisenhower crushes the cigarette in an already overflowing ashtray. Command is full of hell things, Bedell. This is just one more. December 21st. The weather clears. For a week, fog and low clouds have grounded Allied air power. German columns moved with relative impunity. American defenders fought without close air support. But on the 21st, the skies open. Allied fighters and fighter bombers launch in waves, P-47 Thunderbolts, P-51 Mustangs, RAF Typhoons. They sweep over the Ardennes hunting German armor with rockets and bombs. The effect is immediate and devastating. Panzer columns caught in the open are hammered. Supply convoys incinerate. Command posts are forced to relocate or be destroyed. But the air support does something else, something less visible but equally important. It confirms what German commanders already fear. Allied coordination is improving, American response is accelerating, the window for breakthrough is closing, and Patton is coming. Intercepted German communications show the psychological impact. Air activity indicates major Allied counteroffensive preparation. Enemy coordination suggests 3rd Army operational readiness. Patton likely to commit within 24 hours. The intercepts multiply. Different units, different sectors, all reaching the same conclusion. The Americans are preparing something large. And Patton will lead it. What the Germans do not see is that the air support, while tactically significant, is also strategically coordinated to amplify fear. Eisenhower has ensured that fighter-bomber strikes concentrate on roads leading to 3rd Army positions. Reconnaissance flights deliberately circle Patton's assembly areas. Radio traffic increases on frequencies known to be monitored. Every element designed to confirm German suspicions. Patton is coming, in force, soon. The reality is more complex. Patton is coming, but his forces are still assembling, his logistics are stretched, his divisions are moving fast but arriving piecemeal. A determined German commander who committed reserves immediately could blunt 3rd Army's approach, could fortify positions before Patton arrives in strength, but determination requires certainty, and the Wehrmacht has no certainty about what Patton will do, so they wait and prepare and divide their strength between what they are doing and what they fear is coming. December 22nd, dawn. 4th Armored Division strikes north toward Bastogne, not with overwhelming force, with speed and violence. Tank columns supported by infantry. Artillery preparation brief but intense. Advance by bounds, securing objectives before German forces can react. The German defenders are ready, positions prepared, anti-tank guns sighted, armor in support. But they are not committed, because commitment means revealing strength. And revealing strength means Patton will know where to concentrate. So the German defense is strong, but not decisive. Holding, but not counter-attacking. 4th Armored pushes through resistance that should stop them. Not because American firepower is overwhelming, because German firepower is withheld. A panzer division sits 3 miles east of the breakthrough, positioned perfectly to counterattack, capable of crushing 4th Armored's flank. It receives orders to maintain position. Monitor 3rd Army main advance. Engage only if breakthrough threatens operational reserves, the division commander protests. The breakthrough is happening now. The threat is immediate. The response from Corps headquarters is unambiguous. Patton's main force has not committed. Do not engage prematurely. So the panzers wait, and 4th Armored advances. By noon, American tanks are within 10 miles of Bastogne. By evening, 5 miles. German resistance stiffens but does not concentrate. Inside Bastogne, the 101st Airborne hears the sound of American guns. Distant, but growing closer. Relief is possible. At German 5th Panzer Army headquarters, commanders face the reality of their calculations. They prepared for Patton's arrival, positioned reserves to counter his breakthrough, held strength back to respond to his main effort. But Patton's main effort is not where they expected. It is narrower, faster, more focused. And the reserves held back to counter a massive breakthrough are now too far from the actual battle to intervene. They were not defeated by American strength. They were defeated by their own fear of what that strength might do. December 26th, 16:45 hours. Tanks from 4th Armored Division's 37th Tank Battalion break through German lines and enter Bastogne from the southwest. The siege is lifted. Within hours, supply convoys follow. Ammunition, medical supplies, reinforcements. The 101st Airborne has held for 10 days against artillery bombardment, against infantry assault, against cold and hunger and the corrosive uncertainty of isolation. But they held. The public narrative will credit American courage, airborne tenacity, McAuliffe's defiant nuts. All true. What the narrative will not show is that German forces surrounding Bastogne were never fully committed to taking it, because commitment meant vulnerability to Patton. So they besieged without crushing, attacked without overwhelming, maintained strength in reserve for a counteroffensive that never came the way they expected. The relief of Bastogne becomes the visible symbol of American resilience. The invisible reality is that fear relieved Bastogne before 4th Armored arrived. At Versailles, Eisenhower receives the news without celebration. He marks the map. Bastogne relieved, 4th Armored committed, German reserves finally engaging, but the intercepts tell a different story. Wehrmacht commanders are only now realizing the extent of their miscalculation. Reserves that should have been committed days ago are now rushing forward, but piecemeal, uncoordinated. The offensive that began with such promise is fragmenting under the weight of its own caution. One message from von Rundstedt to Berlin is particularly stark. Patton counteroffensive developed faster than assessed. Reserves committed too late to prevent Bastogne relief. Southern flank now vulnerable to exploitation. Request permission to withdraw to defensive positions. Eisenhower reads it and sets it aside. The Battle of the Bulge is not over. Weeks of hard fighting remain. But the decisive moment has passed, not in any single engagement, not in any dramatic breakthrough. In the slow accumulation of hesitation, the 1,000 small decisions shaped by fear rather than opportunity. The Wehrmacht attacked because they feared Allied offensive. They held reserves because they feared Patton's response. They divided strength because they feared commitment. And fear, properly cultivated, became operational paralysis. Bedell Smith enters the office. So 3rd Army is requesting fuel priority for continued offensive operations. Eisenhower does not look up from the map. Approved, and make sure German intelligence sees the supply convoys. Smith allows himself a small smile. Still feeding the fear, sir. Until it stops working, Bedell, until it stops working. But something else is happening, something Eisenhower does not discuss, something he barely admits to himself. He has weaponized a man. George Patton does not know that his value lies not in what he does, but in what the enemy thinks he might do. He does not know that his aggressive instincts are being amplified and broadcast to maximize psychological impact. He thinks he is fighting despite Eisenhower's caution. The truth is, he is fighting because of Eisenhower's calculation, and that calculation has a cost. Late on the 26th, Eisenhower stands alone in his office, map on the wall showing the 3rd Army's advance. Intercepts on his desk showing German fear. The strategy is working, better than he dared hope, but it requires using Patton without his knowledge, amplifying his reputation without his consent, treating him as a weapon rather than a commander. It requires lying to an ally to deceive an enemy. Eisenhower has made harder decisions, sent men to die with full knowledge they would not return, sacrificed units to preserve strategy, accepted losses that would have broken lesser commanders. But those were tactical choices, necessary evils in service of victory. This is different. This is personal manipulation, using a man's nature against him, exploiting friendship for advantage. It is effective. It is necessary. It is corrosive. Eisenhower crushes another cigarette. The ashtray overflows. He should empty it. He does not. Outside Versailles is quiet under winter darkness. Inside, the Supreme Commander carries a weight that has nothing to do with divisions or logistics or strategic planning. It is the weight of truths that cannot be shared, of victories that cannot be celebrated, of friendships that exist in the space between respect and utility. Command Eisenhower has learned is the loneliest form of power, not because you stand alone, but because you must use even those closest to you, and never tell them why. January 5th, 1945. The Battle of the Bulge is finished, not with drama, with exhaustion. German forces withdraw eastward through frozen mud and shattered forests. American units advance into positions that 3 weeks earlier seemed lost forever. The salient collapses, the front stabilizes. At Versailles, staff officers compile casualty figures: 19,000 Americans dead, 60,000 wounded, 15,000 captured. German losses higher still, entire panzer divisions reduced to remnants. The numbers are presented to Eisenhower in morning briefing. He listens without expression, signs the report, dismisses the staff. Then he returns to his office and opens a different file, the one kept in his personal safe, the one no briefing officer sees. Ultra intercepts, December 16th through January 4th. German command communications decoded and translated. The record of decisions made and opportunities lost. He reads methodically, looking for the pattern he already knows is there. A message from 5th Panzer Army, December 18th. Reserves cannot be committed to Bastogne reduction until Patton's main axis of advance is determined. From 6th Panzer Army, December 23rd, southern shoulder collapse attributable to delayed response. Primary concern for 3rd Army exploitation prevented timely reinforcement. From von Rundstedt to Berlin, January 2nd. Operational failure resulted from divided objectives. Simultaneous execution of planned offensive and defense against anticipated counteroffensive proved unsustainable. Eisenhower closes the file. The Wehrmacht defeated itself, not through lack of skill or courage or determination, through fear of possibilities that never fully materialized. They fought the battle they planned and the battle they feared, and lost both because commitment to either meant vulnerability to the other. The strategy worked, better than doctrine, better than strength, better than any conventional calculation of force ratios and logistics. Psychology became terrain, fear became maneuver, and Patton, who still believes he won despite Eisenhower's caution, was the weapon that made it possible. The winter campaigns continue, February through April, the systematic reduction of German defensive positions, the crossing of the Rhine, the final push into the heart of the Reich. But the pattern established in the Ardennes repeats with mechanical predictability. 3rd Army receives enough fuel to maintain aggressive operations, not abundance, just enough. Enough to probe, enough to threaten, enough to keep German intelligence reporting movement and intent. Montgomery's massive Rhine crossing at Wesel proceeds with maximum preparation, airborne assault, artillery bombardment lasting hours, methodical advance against prepared defenses. The crossing succeeds, as planned, with acceptable casualties. What Montgomery's staff does not see is that German mobile reserves opposite his front are thin, positioned defensively, not postured for the kind of counterattack doctrine would suggest, because those reserves are elsewhere. Watching Patton. March 7th, Remagen. The Ludendorff Bridge captured intact through fortune and German error. American forces pour across, establish a bridgehead on the eastern bank. German high command orders immediate counterattack, destroy the bridgehead, recapture the bridge, prevent exploitation. But the panzer divisions that could crush Remagen in the first critical hours are not available. They are positioned south, covering against 3rd Army breakthrough. By the time Wehrmacht commanders realize Remagen is the immediate threat, American positions are too strong to dislodge. The opportunity passes, lost to fear of what Patton might do somewhere else. Eisenhower reads the intercepts showing German confusion. Orders to move reserves north, counter-orders to maintain southern coverage. Arguments between commanders about priority, paralysis disguised as caution. He marks nothing on the map. The pattern speaks for itself. March 22nd, night. Patton crosses the Rhine at Oppenheim, without weeks of preparation, without massive artillery support, with assault boats and engineers, and the kind of aggressive speed that doctrine says is reckless. By dawn, an entire division is across. By noon, armor follows. German response is delayed, confused, mobile units positioned for a crossing that was expected further south, or further north, or with more visible preparation. The Wehrmacht is ready for Patton to cross. They are not ready for him to cross here, now, this way. When Patton telephones Eisenhower to report success, his voice carries satisfaction that borders on vindication. Across the Rhine, didn't lose a man in the crossing, guessed the Germans were looking the wrong direction. Eisenhower's response is measured. Well done, George. What he does not say is that the Germans were looking the wrong direction, because that is where Eisenhower aimed their attention. That Patton's crossing succeeded partly because Wehrmacht fear immobilized strength 60 miles away, that the voice on the telephone belongs to a weapon that does not know it is being fired. The conversation ends. Eisenhower sets the receiver down carefully. Outside March, rain falls on Versailles. Inside, the Supreme Commander sits with the weight of truths that cannot be shared. May 8th, 1945, Germany surrenders. The documents are signed in a schoolhouse in Reims, no ceremony, no grand pronouncements, just signatures and the mechanical conclusion of catastrophe. Eisenhower receives the surrender without celebration. He has seen too much, lost too many, carried too many decisions that will never be fully understood. That night, he writes a brief message to the combined chiefs of staff. The mission of this Allied force was fulfilled at 0241 local time, May 7th, 1945. 23 words, the war in Europe summarized in a single sentence. What he does not write, cannot write, is how that mission was fulfilled. The strategies that will remain classified, the psychological warfare that shaped German deployment more than American strength, the weaponization of reputation and fear. Some victories are too complex for official record. June 3rd, 1945. London. Victory parade through streets lined with crowds who have survived 6 years of war. Churchill and Eisenhower in open car, soldiers marching in formation, flags and music and the desperate joy of survival. That evening, a formal dinner. British and American commanders gathered to celebrate what they have won and forget what it cost. Montgomery sits to Eisenhower's right, receiving praise for methodical brilliance, the careful general who planned victory and executed it with precision. Patton sits further down the table, acknowledged for aggressive leadership, the bold general who terrified the enemy and advanced faster than anyone thought possible. The roles are set, the narrative complete. Each man in the story history will tell. After dinner, after the speeches and toasts, Eisenhower finds himself in a quiet room with Patton. No aides, no staff, just two men who have worked together and against each other for 3 years. Patton loosens his tie. The pearl-handled revolvers are gone, replaced by dress uniform and decorations, but the man beneath is unchanged, direct, blunt, resentful. You kept me on starvation rations the whole goddamn war, Ike. Not quite accusatory, not quite joking, something darker. The accumulated frustration of a man who believes he won despite his commander rather than because of him. Eisenhower measures his response. Every word matters here. Every silence carries weight. I gave you what you needed, George. Monty got twice what I got every time. More fuel, more supplies, more priority. Montgomery had different requirements. Patton's laugh is short, bitter. Montgomery had political requirements. I had Germans to kill. Eisenhower cannot argue, because beneath the complaint is truth. Montgomery did receive priority because of politics. British pride. Alliance management. Churchill's demands. But there is another truth, one Eisenhower will never speak. Montgomery received priority because the Germans expected it, which made Patton's limitations more valuable. Because the Wehrmacht could not understand why the most dangerous American commander was being starved of resources, so they assumed deception, assumed Patton's limited logistics were cover for massive preparations, assumed the next offensive would come from Third Army regardless of evidence, and they positioned reserves accordingly. Patton's resentment made him unpredictable. His bitterness made him aggressive. His feeling of being undervalued made him push harder, attack faster, exploit opportunities others would consolidate. And Eisenhower used all of it, without explanation, without acknowledgement. He looks at Patton now, 59 years old, iron will wrapped in profanity, a man who believes respect is measured in fuel allocations and supply priority, who does not know that his greatest contribution was not the ground he captured, but the enemy strength he paralyzed without ever engaging. Eisenhower wants to explain that fear of Third Army immobilized more German divisions than Third Army ever fought, that Patton's reputation was a strategic asset more valuable than Montgomery's entire army group, that he was not undervalued, he was weaponized. But explanation would change everything, would make Patton conscious of the effect rather than instinctive, would turn aggression into performance, would destroy the weapon by revealing how it works. So Eisenhower says, the only thing he can, "You fought brilliantly, George. History will remember Third Army's record. No one advanced faster, no one hit harder." Patton searches his face, looking for something beneath the words, some acknowledgement of what he sacrificed, what he endured. He does not find it, because it cannot be given without explaining why sacrifice was necessary. After a long moment, Patton nods. "Yeah, well, we got the job done." He stands, straightens his uniform. The moment passes. "You know what the problem is, Ike? You think too much. You calculate. You manage. You balance." He moves toward the door, pauses. "War isn't math, it's violence, and I'm better at violence than anyone in this goddamn army." The door closes behind him. Eisenhower sits alone in the quiet room. Patton is right. He is better at violence than anyone in the army. What he will never know is that Eisenhower turned that violence into something more valuable than victory, into fear, into paralysis, into the invisible weapon that won battles Patton never fought. The loneliness of command is not commanding alone. It is knowing truths you cannot share with the men who made them possible. The summer passes. American forces occupy Germany. The machinery of victory becomes the machinery of occupation. Soldiers who fought together prepare to go home. Patton does not go home. He is appointed military governor of Bavaria, a position meant to use his organizational ability, to channel aggression into administration. It does not suit him. Reports reach Eisenhower throughout the summer, Patton clashing with occupation policy, making controversial statements, treating defeated Germans with soldiers' respect rather than victors' contempt. The man built for war cannot navigate peace. In September, Eisenhower relieves him as military governor, gives him a largely ceremonial role. Third Army command in title but not in substance. Patton is bitter, feels betrayed. Again, he does not know that Eisenhower is trying to protect him, that the war is over and weapons, once the battle ends, have no purpose. That keeping him visible in peacetime only exposes the gap between reputation and reality. Better to let him fade, to preserve the legend without testing it against occupation politics and denazification policy. But Patton will not fade quietly. December 9th, 1945, Germany. The staff car carrying General Patton collides with an army truck outside Mannheim. The impact is not severe, the vehicles are not moving fast, but Patton's neck snaps forward. Vertebrae fracture, spinal cord damaged, he is paralyzed from the neck down. Transport to military hospital in Heidelberg. The best doctors, the best care available to a 4-star general. It is not enough. Patton lies in the hospital bed, unable to move, mind sharp, body destroyed. He receives visitors, speaks with his wife, makes plans for recovery that will not come. On December 21st, a pulmonary embolism stops his heart. George Smith Patton Jr. dies at 13:30 hours, 60 years old, 9 months after Germany surrendered. December 23rd, 1945, Luxembourg. The American military cemetery sits on a hillside overlooking the city. Thousands of white crosses in perfect rows. The men who died to liberate Europe buried in the ground, they freed. Patton is interred among them, not in a place of honor, just another grave in a long line, the way he requested. The funeral is full military honors, flag-draped coffin, honor guard, 3-volley salute, taps played by a single bugler in winter silence. Eisenhower stands with other senior commanders. Montgomery is there, Bradley, Devers, the men who led armies through Europe. They salute as the coffin is lowered, stand at attention as the ceremony concludes. Then one by one they depart, cars waiting to take them back to headquarters, to occupation duties, to the business of peace. Eisenhower remains, the cemetery empties, mourners gone, honor guard dismissed. Just white crosses and December cold and the Supreme Commander standing at a grave. Bedell Smith approaches quietly, stands beside him without speaking. For several minutes neither man moves, then Eisenhower breaks the silence. He never knew, Bedell, Smith waits, that he was the most valuable weapon we had, that the Germans feared him more than they feared anything else we could bring against them, that his reputation immobilized more divisions than his attacks ever destroyed. Smith's voice is quiet. You couldn't tell him. No, because telling him would have changed him, made him perform instead of just being himself. Yes, Eisenhower looks down at the grave, fresh earth, temporary marker. Eventually there will be a white cross like all the others. He died thinking I didn't respect him, that I gave priority to Montgomery out of politics, that I held him back when he could have won the war faster. Did he say that? In London, June. He said I kept him on starvation rations while Montgomery got everything. Smith is quiet for a moment. He was right. And he was wrong. Yes. The wind picks up. Cold December air moving through the cemetery. Eisenhower pulls his coat tighter. The Germans respected Montgomery, built defenses against him, calculated his approach and matched it with doctrine. They could plan for Montgomery because he planned everything. He pauses. But Patton, they couldn't plan for. So they held back reserves, positioned strength against possibilities, fought battles he never showed up to fight. And you used that. I used that. Smith chooses his next words carefully. Did you use him, or did you just recognize what was already there and not interfere? Eisenhower considers this. Both. I saw what the Germans feared, then I made sure they kept fearing it, gave Patton enough resources to stay aggressive, made his movements visible, let their intelligence see what they expected to see. But you never told him why. No, because if I told him he was a psychological weapon, he might have started thinking like one, and thinking would have made him predictable. His value was that he didn't think about effect. He just attacked. That's a hell of a thing, using a man's nature against him. Not against him, for all of us. Eisenhower's voice drops. But yes, it's a hell of a thing. They stand in silence. The cemetery is empty, except for the dead and the two men who sent so many to join them. Finally, Smith speaks. The strategy worked. The bulge, the Rhine, all of it. German deployment shaped by fear, more than by our actual strength. Yes. Patton's aggression fixed reserves that could have turned battles elsewhere. Yes. And he died not knowing any of it. Eisenhower nods slowly. Some truths cost more than they're worth, Bedell. George died a hero. Let him stay one. History will remember him as the general who terrified Germany, who advanced faster than anyone, who won despite being held back. He turns from the grave. The truth that he was held back precisely to make him more terrifying, that truth serves no one. It doesn't change the outcome. It just makes the victory feel dirtier. They walk toward the waiting car. Smith ventures one last observation. Sir, what you did, using psychology as terrain fear as a weapon? That's not in any manual. No. Will you write about it? In your memoirs. Eisenhower is quiet for a long moment. Maybe, carefully, without names, without details, a principle rather than an admission. Why? Because the lesson is valuable, but the execution was... He searches for the word. Ruthless. Command at its most necessary and most corrosive, using men without their knowledge, exploiting friendship for advantage. They reach the car, stop before getting in. Eisenhower looks back at the cemetery. Thousands of graves, Pattons among them. War requires things we don't talk about afterward. Sacrifices that aren't just about dying. Sometimes you sacrifice truth. Sometimes you sacrifice relationships. Sometimes you sacrifice the right to be understood. He opens the car door. That's the price of command. You carry the weight alone. And when the men who could have understood die, the weight becomes permanent. They drive away. The cemetery recedes behind them. George Patton rests among the soldiers who followed him, never knowing he was more valuable as a threat than as a force, never knowing his greatest battles were fought in the minds of German commanders who positioned strength to counter attacks that never came, never knowing that the supreme commander who he thought undervalued him actually turned him into the invisible weapon that helped win the war. Some truths die with the men who carry them. This one dies with Patton, and will haunt Eisenhower for the rest of his life. 1948, New York. Dwight Eisenhower publishes his wartime memoirs, Crusade in Europe. an account of command from North Africa through Germany's surrender. The book is careful, diplomatic, praising Montgomery's preparation and Patton's audacity without revealing the psychological warfare that shaped how both were used. One passage buried in a chapter on strategic decision-making hints at something deeper. In war, the enemy's perception of your strength can be as valuable as the strength itself. Sometimes the greatest contribution a commander makes is not the ground he captures, but the ground the enemy is afraid to leave undefended. No names, no specifics, no admission, just a principle, one that most readers will pass over without noticing, but military historians will circle it, return to it. Wonder what Eisenhower is not saying. The sentence will be quoted in war colleges, analyzed in strategic studies, debated among scholars who sense there is a story beneath the words. They will never know the full story, because the men who lived it are dead or silent, and the documents that would prove it remain classified for decades. 2018, the National Archives, College Park, Maryland. A military historian sits in a research room surrounded by declassified files, ultra-intercepts from World War II, German communications decoded and translated, the raw intelligence that shaped Allied decisions. She has spent 3 months tracking a pattern, Wehrmacht operational orders from late 1944 through early 1945, deployment of panzer reserves, mobile unit positioning, defensive preparations. The pattern is striking. Again and again, German strength concentrates against Third Army sectors, even when Third Army holds secondary positions, even when logistical reports show Patton operating with limited fuel and supplies. She pulls another file. Captured German maps from collapsed headquarters, Third Army positions circled in red, annotations in German Hauptgefahr, main danger. Schwerpunkt, focus point. Even when Patton is not attacking German reserves, remain positioned to counter him. She cross-references with Allied resource allocation records, now declassified. Montgomery's 21st Army Group, 1,400 tons of fuel per day, priority for supplies and replacements. Patton's Third Army, 700 tons per day, secondary priority. The disparity is massive. Yet German forces concentrate against the army receiving less. She sits back. Pieces connecting. The Germans were not responding to Allied strength, they were responding to Allied threat, to reputation, to fear of what Patton might do. And someone at SHAEF understood this, used it, amplified Patton's reputation while limiting his resources, making the disparity itself a source of German confusion. She pulls Eisenhower's memoirs from her bag, flips to the passage she has read a dozen times. Sometimes the greatest contribution a commander makes is not the ground he captures, but the ground the enemy is afraid to leave undefended. Now it makes sense. She writes in her notebook, Eisenhower used German fear of Patton as strategic deception. Resource allocation served psychological warfare, not just logistics. Third Army was both threat and distraction. It is a footnote, a pattern visible only when you know what to look for. The men who designed the strategy are long dead. Eisenhower in 69, Patton in 45. The decision-makers who could confirm or deny the interpretation are gone. So it remains academic. Interesting, suggestive, but not definitive. The historian makes her notes, files them, moves on to the next research question. The truth is there, in the archives, in the intercepts, in the deployment records, but without confession, without acknowledgement, it remains invisible, just like the victory it describes. The cemetery in Luxembourg has grown over the decades. More visitors now, school groups learning history, veterans fewer each year, then gone entirely. Patton's grave looks like all the others, white cross, name and rank, dates. Nothing marks it as special. Nothing indicates the man buried here was more than a soldier who died after the war ended. Tourists sometimes photograph it, the grave of the famous general, the one from the movie. They do not know he was a weapon, that his reputation immobilized German divisions, that he won battles without fighting them. They do not know because the strategy was never celebrated, never acknowledged, never explained. Some victories are too complex for monuments. Some truths are too dark for public memory. The war was won by many things, courage and sacrifice and industrial might and Allied cooperation, but also by psychology, by fear, by turning the enemy's calculations against them, by using men without their knowledge, by carrying the weight of that use in silence. Dwight Eisenhower understood this, lived with it, took it to his grave, and now decades later, only the pattern remains, visible in archives to those who look closely enough. But absent from the narrative most people learn, the invisible victory stays invisible, as perhaps it must, because acknowledging it means acknowledging that war is won not just by heroes, but by manipulation, not just by strength, but by deception, not just by courage, but by the ruthless use of human psychology. And that is a truth harder to celebrate than the ones carved on monuments. December 12th, 1944, 21:40 hours, Versailles Palace, second floor. In the quiet of room 24, Eisenhower and Bedell Smith make a decision that will never appear in official records. We plan around enemy fear, not Allied pride. 6 words that change everything. They do not know then that it will work beyond calculation, that German deployment will fracture under psychological pressure, that Patton's reputation will become more valuable than Patton's actual strength. They only know that the enemy has revealed what it fears, and fear properly used is terrain. The conversation ends. Smith leaves. Eisenhower returns to his maps. Outside, December fog blankets the palace gardens. Inside, a strategy takes shape that will help win the war and haunt its architect for the rest of his life. Because using fear as a weapon means using men as instruments, and the cost of that is measured not in casualties, but in silence, in truths that cannot be shared, in victories that cannot be celebrated, in the loneliness of knowing what you did and why you can never explain it. Eisenhower learned this lesson in the winter of 1944. He carried it alone until he died. And the weapon he created, George Patton, the general Germany feared most, never knew the role he played. Some debts cannot be repaid. Some truths cannot be spoken. Some wars are won in the darkness between what happened and what was feared. And the commanders who understand that pay the price in Yongju's silence. The palace grows quiet. The maps remain. The decision stands. And history, as it often does, remembers the victory, not the cost of winning it.